I'm pleased to support the Disability Inclusion Review Recommendations Amendment Bill, although in doing so note that the opposition has kept open the possibility that we may be open to supporting amendments in the Legislative Council, depending on further consultation. But certainly we're happy to support this bill. The Minister's speech encourages me to reflect on a couple of things, and I sometimes observe, sir, that there are in many ways few people in the course of human history as fortunate in some ways to be living in this time and this place as a South Australian right now. Any number of places around the world, at any other place in time, most South Australians would be, despite the complexities of modern life, despite the difficulties of mental health and anxiety challenges that seem more prominent in this day and age than they have in the past, and despite the trauma experienced by many people who come to South Australia from places in the world with great difficulty, despite the particular plight of certain segments of our community, by and large, at any other point in time in history, similar experiences for most of people would be experienced. At any other place in the world, similar difficulties would also be experienced. I feel fortunate to be in South Australia. And at this time is a particular area of consideration for people living with a disability in our community. The child born today, while not in every circumstance, but in many, many cases, will have a much better chance of living a fulfilled life, living their best life, fulfilling their potential in every way, if they are born today in South Australia compared to at another time or in another place. And that is a good thing, and it has not been without the efforts of a large number of people along the way, seeking at every point to have their voices heard, whether as a person with a disability or with a family member with a disability, or people who seek to support people with a disability, have sought to support people with a disability in terms of their rights and expectations in society. The opportunity for inclusion to be not just a goal, but an expectation in life was behind the work done by the Honourable Michelle Lensink as Minister, but on behalf of the Liberal Party as government, but on behalf of the whole Parliament which supported the bill, and on behalf of so many advocates and people within South Australia who had endeavoured to have the original bill passed in 2018. That expectation of inclusion carries with it responsibilities of government, of local government, of many people in our community. And that Act also expected that there would be a review conducted by Richard Dennis, as we've heard, in 2022, and indeed that was tabled in September 2022. Just reflecting back slightly to when I was elected 14 years ago today, along with the member for Chaffey, the Honourable Jing Lee, the member for Elizabeth, the Honourable Tammy Franks, and if there's another then I forget. 14 years ago today, when I first became the member for Morialta, indeed government was still working in many ways to improve our expectations, to improve our anticipation, to improve the inclusion that we expected. I had the great opportunity as the Shadow Minister for Disability Services, appointed by the former Leader of the Opposition, Isabel Redmond, and along with Families and Communities and Housing and Youth, she asked me to be the Shadow Minister for Disability. And it was a privilege to be able to be part of that portfolio, and at first shadowing the Honourable Ian Hunter from memory, and secondly shadowing yourself, sir, as a Minister. And I recognise the work you did in disability law reform, particularly after my time as the Shadow, when I think Duncan McFetridge was the Shadow Minister, and I'm sure that he provided the support that was necessary to ensure that that work proceeded in a sensible fashion. But I just reflect on this briefly to express my gratitude to all of those people who gave me education and advice as a new Shadow Minister, as I was then, to inform me in this portfolio of how I could best support South Australians with a disability, and indeed all members of our community, to have the best support they could from the government. The topic of the NDIS had then been the subject of a Productivity Commission review, but it was very, very early in those discussions. And indeed, as I recall from my discussions with Stephen Wade, who was a former disability shadow, it had been an iterative process, and many people worked towards what we expect for people with a disability and what in their interactions with government. So I thank all of those people, not all of whom I would agree with on every aspect of policy, not all of whom would agree with us on every aspect of policy, but who gave generously of their time. And people like Rick Neagle, people like David Holst, Sam Payer, Judy Curran, Del Stagg, Simon Shrapple, Robbie Williams, Phil Menz from the Physical Disability Council. There were others as well, and that's just off the top of my head the people that immediately occurred to me who gave me hours of their time in helping provide useful advice. And that's informed my perspective. The work that was undertaken by the Honourable Kelly Vincent, former member of the Legislative Council, also bears regard. Kelly was also elected on this day 14 years ago. In that election. At 21, she was the youngest person ever elected to this parliament, and indeed the impact that she had as a member of the Legislative Council was significant. I pay tribute to her and those who supported her in her election. Obviously, the circumstances of her election were tragic, as she filled a role that would have otherwise been gone to their first candidate who passed away during the campaign. But Kelly's election was significant, and she worked very hard to be a voice and a legislator of power and integrity. And I think that the work she did over the course of her 8 years in the Parliament certainly saw fruit in a number of legislative reforms during her time and post her time as well. At the time that this legislation was being drafted initially in 2018, the earlier iteration of it, it's worth noting that Kelly was working in the Education Department as a senior advisor in our disability support area. And it's with that in mind that I guess I want to turn my attention more directly to the bill at hand. The bill at hand responds to, and I'll come back to education is the point of the segue I guess I was just making. The bill is looking to make changes in response to the Dennis Review, the review that was required by the Act. It made 51 recommendations, including adding paragraphs to expressly state that people with disability, regardless of age, have a right to be safe and to feel safe through the provision of appropriate safeguards, information, services and support, including definition of barrier in the context of access and inclusion for people living with a disability, clarifying the principles of the Act as they relate to people with significant intellectual disability or high levels of vulnerability due to disability, enacting provisions currently appearing in regulations as provisions in the Act, and adjusting reporting requirements and timeframes for inclusive SA and state authority disability access and inclusion plans. As you can gather from the tenor of the list I've just read, some of these are more significant reforms and some of them are modest but necessarily potentially worthy. Specifically, the bill will enact provisions currently appearing in the regulations as provisions in the Act in terms of what the government has actually chosen to proceed with. 14 of the 20 legislative recommendations. They include the definition of barrier in the Act. They include new paragraphs within the Act to provide expressly that people with disability, regardless of age, have a right to be safe, and so forth. Amend sections within the Act to enhance clarity or definition of principles. Amend sections within the Act relating to reporting requirements and timeframes. They require consultation with people with lived experience and authorise the formation of groups to facilitate consultation. I'm not criticising the bill when I say that there is more to do, and there are recommendations in the Act that have not been addressed in the bill, and it is going to be critical for the government to be clear about whether there are going to be further legislative changes proposed or whether they do not propose to go down that path. It's going to be important for the government, in my view, to respond to the non-legislative recommendations. As Minister Cook has stated, that 30 recommendations are not legislative. Some of those are very important, and while I believe that some of them potentially could be included within the context of legislation, and it would certainly not be novel for the Parliament, should it choose to do so through amendment to this bill or consideration in a further bill, to enhance what we do for people with a disability in South Australia, indeed with people with disability in South Australia, working with them, that we would consider those. I know Purple Orange, for example, has already suggested amendments. I'm sure that there will be further discussion in the Legislative Council in terms of specifics. I want to turn my attention to a particular recommendation, recommendation 46, and I'll take the moment to. It's not an unreasonably long passage from the report, and I think it will set the scene perfectly for the commentary I would make about education. So on page 51 of the report, for the benefit of Hansard, an important aspect of disability inclusion is highlighted by the Commissioner for Children and Young People's report, being that children and young people living with disability want to blend in and engage with other children and young people their age. The report continues, when young people with disability are placed in situations where their differences are highlighted over their shared experiences or common interests, their capacity to blend with kids their own age becomes problematic. This is particularly relevant when it comes to issues associated with children at school. And during the course of the review, it was noted that an inclusive education, with any necessary and appropriate support for the child, not only benefits the child, but also allows other children at the same school to gain a better understanding of the challenges facing children living with disability. It is clear that it is essential that children living with disability must be given the best opportunity to receive the best education so that they can maximise their potential and make the most of life as they advance into adulthood. So, for example, to have the best chance to apply for and compete for a job like any other person. In connection with this, other children around the child living with a disability may be given more of a chance to develop into adults who respect people living with disability and who have a much better understanding of social inclusion. The more that this occurs, the more community attitudes in relation to disability inclusion can change over time. As has been said, social inclusion is more than physical presence. It's also a sense of feeling that you belong, are connected, and are surrounded by a range of relationships. An important part of the experience for children at school is therefore to focus not only on their education, which is of critical importance, but also on their well-being and the social aspects of school. The reviewer appreciated the opportunity to discuss the work being undertaken by the Education Department to implement its Disability Access and Inclusion Plan and various other initiatives, procedures and policies that the Education Department has in place to improve the learning and development outcomes for students living with disability in South Australia. This work is also consistent with Priority 10 in the State Disability Inclusion Plan. A significant factor in recent times has been the work of the Royal Commission in reviewing the experience of children and young people with disability in different education settings. It is obviously not for this review to replicate or preempt the work of the Royal Commission or to provide advice in relation to specialist areas associated with the education of children and young people living with disability. However, there is no doubt that the more that the Education Department can support these children and young people to have the educational experience that occurs within the mainstream of education, the better. As previously mentioned, children constitute a specific priority group under Section 9 of the Act, and this report includes recommendations that are intended to improve the focus on these groups, including in relation to addressing the principles and risks identified in the case of children under Section 9(3) of the Act. In view of the interest in the extent to which mainstream activities and support has generated interest as part of the review, it would be an excellent outcome if the Education Department could provide a specific report on the work of the department to support and enable children living with disability to successfully participate in mainstream learning and social experiences and outcomes while at school. The recommendation goes on to say so, and this is also listed as recommendation 46 of the 51. The Chief Executive, I assume the Chief Executive for the Department of Human Services, but it could be read as Cabinet for all that it would make a difference. I think the point is the action. Should request the Education Department to include specific information in its annual report on the operation of its Disability Access and Inclusion Plan for the 2022-23 financial year on the extent to which children living with disability are able to participate in mainstream learning and social experiences at school. it is requested that this information include A, an outline about how the success of initiatives, procedures and programs designed to assist children living with disability is measured, especially in relation to the learning outcomes and wellbeing, and B, recent results against those measures. It's the end of the quote. It may well be that the reviewer was talking about the Education Chief Executive. I note the Education Chief Executive is actually responsible for the publication through the Minister of that report. So in any case, it's more than possibly within his power. I say his because it's Martin Westwell at the moment. The recommendation is a good one. It may or may not require legislative reform to do it. It may be that this is something that the government can undertake without it needing to be included in the Act. Certainly hope that it does so, because I think that one of the key parts of this is not just in terms of outlining and priority of the success of reforms to support students with disability, but their effectiveness. Helping our young people to live full lives. It's not just supporting people with disability, children and students with disability, that is, for all children. We want to ensure their education system is best equipped to enable them to reach full lives, their best potential, get the most out of their potential pathway towards a job, a career, or whatever it is they wish to do in life. And the Department for Education is responsible for, I am not exaggerating when I say thousands of programs throughout schools and preschools and central office to assist us to do that. The settings for a child with a specific disability or a specific set of circumstances in one town may be an entirely different response from the Education Department if they are in a suburb in the city or a different suburb in the city, depending on a range of factors, the built environment of the school, how old it is, the programs that exist in that school, the specialisation and the experience of the teachers in that school or preschool, the support staff that are relevant, the proximity to a regional office with appropriate expertise. Indeed, regional offices have vacancies at high levels in some areas and low levels in others. The point is that there is a vast swathe of programs operating. And when a government implements a new set of programs, particularly in this area, the experience for young people is going to be very different. I note the government has autism inclusion teachers program, a day or half a day a week in a range of primary schools around South Australia. Such a recommendation, if implemented, I think would provide very useful advice about the efficacy of those roles and that expenditure. It may well give them a big tick, it may well identify how they could be improved or enhanced. At any rate, I think analysing new policies and new approaches is always worthwhile. In my experience during the 4 years that I was the Minister for Education, I particularly paid tribute to a public servant by the name of Ian May, who is the Director of Support and Inclusion throughout most of that 4 years, if not all of it, and who's recently retired from the department, an excellent public servant. The Gonski agreement that I signed with the Federal Minister Dan Tehan in 2019 unlocked automatic extra funding going to the department for students with disability. And until we signed that, until the state Liberal government under Premier Marshall and myself as Education Minister signed that document, such funding might be anticipated to be applied to a school after the fact, once they applied to head office. But the department would have a series of processes to go through that were much more complex than they are now. Now that we can automatically get from Treasury the funding that is required if somebody is eligible under the nationally consistent collection of data, and the Gonski funding flows automatically. And that enabled us to reduce the number of students awaiting a placement in either a junior primary school or a primary school or a high school at the beginning of the school year, whether they required extra support through assistance in the mainstream classroom or a special class if they needed an extra bit of support, or a placement in a special school or a disability unit if they needed that extra level of adjustment to their program. That flowing automatically was very important, and being able to place those young people early was very important. There is still a discussion to be had in education about the nature of inclusive education. And there are complex and difficult and controversial discussions to be had there. And I don't propose to present a solution to any of those discussions right now, but as the starting point, what we expect each one of us, for the outcomes for young people through the schooling system, as for people with disability in any circumstance within our society. That expectation, they be able to live full lives, unencumbered and supported as necessary to live their best life is a great starting point. I support the bill, but acknowledge that there'll be further discussion, potentially about amendments and in committee stage in due course.